Hi everybody and welcome back in my bathroom. Today we have Graham from MMGP because actually he sent me two soaps here. So hi Graham, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Very nice to meet you face to face and to
Yeah,
say
yeah,
hi
yeah.
to all your fans. It's really very impressive.
Nice to meet you too, and I am happy to have you here. So while I shave, you will have the opportunity to talk about your product to my audience. And
Fantastic.
yeah, to be honest, I have tested one of those already, and
Oh,
is morning at the barber's, which is basically lavender.
hmm
I mean, lavender is a main note, and honestly, I loved it. I liked it a lot. So yeah,
Fantastic.
he sent me lavender and also afternoon in Capri. Oh, yeah, afternoon in
Perfect.
is mainly citrusy, right?
Correct. It is. Yeah. I
Yeah.
thought for a Roman it was perfect to send you something for Capri, since that's where all Roman emperors had their holiday homes.
Yeah, well, actually, to be honest, what I prefer is the fresh citrusy scent, considering that right now we have 31 degrees Celsius here,
Wow.
so it's quite warm. Yeah.
15 degrees in Scotland.
Yeah, we get 15 degrees here in November.
Yeah, it's +5 in November if we're lucky.
Yeah, so this soap is hard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a
so tell
hard
us,
It's a
yeah, so
hard vegan soap, but reality is its hardness is deceptive because it doesn't really take very much to get a good lather going because of its ingredients.
yeah, tell us about the ingredients, please.
Well, it's basically a vegan soap, so it's got a very high stearic and palmitic acid concentration, which is the backbone for all shaving soaps. Um, I I aimed to try to create a soap that would have um, lots of slickness, good protection, and it would be a moisturizing and comfortable shave. So I spent a great deal of time and research on butters in particular
Hmm.
and came up with 7 of them in total, which basically go towards supporting the construction of the base.
Okay.
So that was the
And
idea behind that.
and how long did it take to, start your company and coming out
Uh,
with a decent product? And
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah. The idea came to me after I had read an article about Kickstarter and how Kickstarter was disrupting consumer electronics markets. So I started to read it, and sure enough, it's true. But I discovered the original Rockwell campaign and decided to buy myself a Rockwell 6C on the
Mhm.
strength of the feedback. So it was a very, very positive campaign. I got the razor and then quickly realized that there was much more to wet shaving than just a razor, and there was a whole world out there in terms of brushes and soaps and all kinds of stuff. So,
Yeah,
but
that's
I
true.
found when I was living in Russia at the time, which is a whole different story, that uh, it was
That's
quite
actually a
difficult.
quite interesting story that
Yeah, yeah, it is. I can come back and tell you all about that another time with,
yeah.
with great pleasure. The gist of it was I discovered that everything in Russia cost more. And
Hmm.
being
Oh,
Scottish, I was
really?
like, didn't fancy paying like a Russia tax to get things. And then I had this epiphany where I thought, oh, how hard could it be to make shaving soap? So I went off to the UK to a soap school, came back after having learned how to make soap, but then realized that shaving soap as a product was quite different from shaving soaps. So I
Mhm.
spent a few months playing around with ingredients and recipes and fragrances and whatnot until I eventually hit on a soap base and I had a brand and all the rest of it and started selling. Initially, it was quite difficult to sell because no one believed they were real. The notion that there was a British guy living in Krasnogorsk outside Moscow making shaving soap was quite bizarre to most Russians. So they would phone up and to see who was the British guy and have conversations with the British guy. And for them, it was a bit of a joke, but then they realized it was real. So then I became quite a curiosity for them, and they liked the products and they liked what we were trying to do. So obviously, as all of your viewers are aware, something happened in 2022, and we had to come back to the UK. But the upside of that was I was suddenly able to access ingredients which were previously unavailable to me in Russia. So I had been doing.
So you continued your research about that perfect formula once you got back to Scotland?
Yeah. More or less. The issue was that certain butters are just not available in Russia. There's not a market for them. So I got back to the UK and started sourcing ingredients and trying to combine them in a way which would, to my mind, provide an excellent, superior vegan soap. And what you have tonight is the result. The next part of the conundrum, and it's the same for all soap manufacturers, is trying to find good fragrance vendors. Because we're all Europeans, and unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, we're all highly limited and highly regulated in terms of what we can put in our products, in terms of allergens and percentages of how much. So one of the kind of criticisms that's always leveled at shaving soap makers is, your soap is very nice, but I can't smell anything, or your soap, the fragrance doesn't last very long and it's weak. And the truth of the matter is, it's exceptionally difficult to find good fragrances. The number of actual fragrance manufacturers that have designed products for this type of thing is fairly limited. So we were quite fortunate. After we must have bought hundreds of samples of fragrances and tested them and sniffed them and left them for a day, left them for a few days, came back to them, tried to figure out what could we use these fragrances for. Did we have a label for them? Did they fit in with the kind of the brand? Because some fragrances in particular, like a citrus fragrance, it smells beautiful, but the problem from a chemical perspective is citrus molecules are very large and they evaporate very quickly.
Yeah,
so
in fact, it's a top notes usually.
Yeah. So they're here and then they're gone. And so you try to find a nice fresh citrus fragrance that lasts. So you were having to try to figure out, well, which fragrances would last, which in terms of base notes like vetivers and patchoulis and various sandalwoods and that type of thing. So after it probably took 2 to 3 times as long to find the fragrances as it did to find the soap base. So after that, it was a case of going through the legislative process of getting everything licensed. So we finished that, and then we had started to create our website and started to sell. So I think we've been open now for about 6 weeks or so selling soaps. But we'd sent lots of soaps all around the world to different reviewers with a hope of trying to spread our name far and wide, because in Europe it's very difficult to start manufacturing products like this because of the legislative hurdles that you've got to get round or get over. So we're very pleased, and that looks like a very nice lather, I must admit.
Yeah, the lather is actually very nice.
Yeah, it looks very good.
And it holds water quite good, actually.
Yeah,
Anyway,
yeah.
about the about your concern about the persistence of the perfume inside the soap, I have to tell you, and the reason is that having the channel, you know, I test a lot of stuff.
Of course
So
you do. You'll know more
also,
about it than me, in actual fact.
yeah, well, what happened is that also American manufacturer, which were usually the one that used to put a lot of perfume inside their soap,
Yeah.
they are reducing, and probably is because of the regulation, which is getting stricter.
And it's costly. That's the other aspect.
Yeah,
Fragrances cost a lot.
yeah,
So
yeah, true.
one of the cosmetic assessors that we use said that you're entitled to use 3% fragrance in shaving soaps, but most commercial manufacturers use less because the cost of the fragrance is a substantial chunk of the cost of the actual product itself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand. And what about your penetration in the European market? Because what happened is that actually, you know, UK
It's
is,
quite difficult.
yeah.
Basically, it's very difficult because when Brexit happened, the UK adopted EU laws, and in terms of being able to access the European market, the standard
Yeah,
of
but
the
you still have the
licensing,
custom to pay.
you've got that. That's another issue. But even just to be in a position to physically sell to a retailer, you have to have your products assessed to the same standard as the EU, which is all right in the UK because they mirror that aspect. But then it gets a bit sneaky in that in order for you to sell anything inside the EU to a retailer, you've got to find something called a named person. And this
Mm,
named person is effectively the person who answered questions in terms of whether the product itself has any reported issues with it. But in order to access the cosmetic database of the EU, you have to essentially hand over the crown jewels to this person who then uploads all this information about your products onto the system, and only then are you allowed to start selling them inside
so
the EU.
basically, you can't do it yourself. You need
No,
a counterpart,
you need a counterpart. So that
which
you
is
have
actually
that.
the importer, basically.
Yeah, yeah. Well, not even. They can just be a man on a bicycle riding along the
Yeah, yeah,
Tiber. It
yeah,
doesn't
but yeah,
matter.
yeah, of course, but
It-
yeah,
Realistically,
the
yes, you're
point is
right.
that should be your importer, your distributor.
Hmm. That's the idea. So you have that issue. So the other version is that in order to say you wanted to buy something from me, the way the EU set itself up, anything that hits EU soil immediately was whacked with import charge and sales tax. So every retailer outside of Europe who wants to sell anything to our European friends has to subscribe to something called iOS. And iOS is the lowest tier. There's an upper tier as well, but iOS effectively means that you can send products to the EU to customers there up to a certain value, and it's not particularly high. Off the top of my head, it's somewhere between 135 and 160 euros.
Mm.
And then after that, they just hit them with taxes and import charges.
Mm-hmm.
But the retailer themselves, so I have to pay a company in Tallinn to collect taxes on behalf of various
Mm-hmm.
sales jurisdictions across Europe.
Yeah, but at the moment you are selling your product through your website, right?
Yeah, yeah, but I still have to pay pay
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
the
of course. But
VAT and
I mean,
etc.
European customer, my Italian friends here, they can buy your product through your your
Website.
website, which is?
Yeah, that's correct. And we have some good news as well, because we have a German retailer who is about to announce that they're stocking our products. So that's something to look forward to. I'll save that for them to announce it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but what is your website?
MMGP.shop.
MMGP.shop. And
Yeah.
yeah, I would like to know, I'm curious about this history of the fox. Why do you have a fox in? And what does MMGP stand for?
Well, it's stories within stories. Very briefly, the idea behind the brand was, I don't know if many of your viewers can remember Gillette's woeful advertising campaign when they got behind Me Too and they talked about toxic masculinity and things.
No, I don't think so.
Oh, you remember? Well, in the English-speaking countries, they ran various ads, which were basically set out to make men feel ashamed of their natures, etc. So I took slight offense at the notion that this was their idea of how to sell shaving products. So I thought to myself, well, what's the kind of the antidote to all of that? And I had been collecting vintage razors, and I remember that the kind of the classic era of Gillette and a sort of an ironic take on it was in the 50s and 60s when they brought out their Fat Boys and their Slims, etc. So I came up with the idea of the fox as this gentleman playboy adventurer who goes on holidays and meets attractive women and has fun with them. And the labels, etc., were designed around that idea. So it was like effectively two collections. The first collection was The Day in the Life of a Gentleman. So it was originally 4 soaps where you saw the fox in his natural habitats. He went to the barbers, then he'd go to his tailor to get a suit, he'd go to his club, and then he'd have a night out. So that was the idea behind those ones. And then the second set were holidays. Where would you see the fox in the summertime and then in the winter? So the summer were all places where you'd imagine a rich playboy, sophisticated man would find himself, like Antibes and Capri and Portofino and places like that. And in the wintertime, off he goes to Switzerland and participates in downhill skiing in San Moritz and has a go on the bobsleigh on the Crescere run.
Mm-hmm.
That was the idea behind that.
And I saw that you have also another series that is called Asgard.
That's correct. We came up, one of the issues we had in Russia was that when we established the website, no one believed who we were, as I've mentioned. So we had to essentially start selling our products through e-commerce platforms. And in the Russian market, it's quite fractured. They don't have an Amazon as such. They have several. So we found that selling on that platform was very successful. We still wanted to sell to retailers if they were interested, but Russian retailers in the main didn't like the idea that manufacturers were also selling directly to customers. They believed it was their role to do that, even though they admitted they were going to do exactly the same thing that we did by putting them on e-commerce platforms. So in order to avoid any kind of controversy on return to the UK, I came up with the second brand, which was to be Asgard Casino. And the idea behind that was, where would you find a god in the modern world? And it was a bit of a joke to suggest that the god would find himself in a casino, because all of the people in the casino were putting money into the slot machines or on the roulette wheels, praying for some success.
Yeah.
This would fuel the power of the gods. So we started off with 3. Obviously, Odin's the guy who owns the casino. 4 is the strong man in the circus, and Loki is the kind of David Blaine magician who spellbinds everybody with mystery and illusion, that type of thing. And the plan is to create more characters to populate the casino. So you might see Fenrir the wolf, the Valkyrie on their horses, etc. Heimdall is the doorman, things like that. So that was the idea behind that.
The ladder of this soap is actually very, very generous, huh?
It is.
Very generous. This is the fourth. I already did 3 passes. And right now, this is the fourth one, which I won't use for shaving. I will use just to, as long as I have all this lather left, I will use it to hydrate the skin.
It's very moisturizing.
Yeah, that's true. And
the way that the soap is created, it's a hot process soap. So for your listeners,
so it produces a lot of glycerin.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a dual lye. Typically, there's 2 lyes, and one of them produces natural glycerin on its own. So effectively, it's got glycerin produced by the transformative process of making soap, but it also has added glycerin. And the key thing for hot process is that you have something called superfat. So it's where you can add ingredients into the soap, which are not soap, but are in the soap. So things like fragrance, for instance, are extras. Glycerin's an extra. So you can, if you a bit of knowledge of chemistry, you can work out which ingredients would you add, because some of the butters actually retain their key benefits throughout the saponification process. So, for instance, shea butter is beloved by soap makers, whether they're hand soap or face soap or even shaving soap, doesn't matter. Shea butter retains its moisturizing properties throughout the entire process. So that's why it's much loved. So
beside the shaving soap, I saw that you produce oil, pre-shave oil.
Correct. Basically. We do.
And may I ask, why don't you have, you still don't have a production of aftershaves, which I would appreciate a lot.
Yeah. The reason being is when we were in Russia, you can't use alcohol without a license from the government. And it was dependent upon your turnover. Your turnover had to reach a specific point before they would give you even a sniff an alcohol license. So we put all our efforts into creating an aftershave balm, and that I've handed off to our fragrance manufacturer, but they're a bit slow. So at the minute, I have this. And this is basically perfumer's alcohol and fragrance. And what you're basically doing to begin with is to see whether or not you can still smell the fragrance with the
you are testing.
I'm testing. So the idea is that eventually there definitely will be an aftershave splash, and but the point about that is that requires retailers to actually import it, because it's essentially a no-no in terms of sending it by airmail.
Of course.
It's very, very difficult. I mean, I've heard some retailers try to pass it off that there's no alcohol in it, but I wouldn't necessarily be flavor of the month if a plane burst into flames.
Yeah.
I'm not sure my indemnity insurance would cover that. I'm definitely not so sure about that. But certainly, yeah, we will produce aftershave splashes.
I am very curious about those, because actually the soaps are very good. and the scent is very good and present while you shave.
Yeah, yeah.
And honestly, is present also as soon as you open the box.
Yeah.
But yeah, usually for my little experience, I can say that the same scent, once you put it in the alcohol, it performs better. So
Yeah, I
I'm
agree.
curious about that.
I agree. I always wanted to produce an aftershave splash, but as I said, I ran into this issue about alcohol and the difficulty of being able to source alcohol and then use it without running into problems later on down the road was always like hanging over your head while we were in Russia. But now we're not. There was only so much you could do in the time that we had. So I thought better to get the things that I can do and can make quite quickly without having to go through this whole testing process again. But and it also requires a retailer network to make it work, because I could definitely sell them in the UK within reasonable limitations, but trying to send it abroad, very difficult. And I watched, as part of this whole process, you spend so much time watching fragrance reviewers to get an idea about fragrances. And there's one particular guy who is a perfumer by trade, and he has his own brand and he sells his product. And the difficulties he faces trying to find logistics companies that will send his product by air is enormous, to the extent he has to subsidize the actual logistics costs himself. The customer does not pay the full price, because if they did, they would never buy it. Simple as that. Just far too expensive. I don't. It's not widely appreciated how difficult a product alcohol is to send. I suspect that's why everything goes by sea normally. But you could imagine you're sending 40 splashes at a time. It occupies next to nothing in a shipping container.
Yeah, of course. It's what, 1 cubic meter?
Yeah, it's like ridiculous.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And you're right. Well, how long is it going to wait on the ship before it gets off?
Yeah.
It'll be the last thing off.
Yeah, I get it.
It'll be weeks before anybody sees it, months maybe.
What you need to do is to have so many customers that you ship one full container of stuff.
That's you're right. It's volume, and at the start, it's like So I don't know, but we'll certainly do that. We've started conversations with brush manufacturers. When we first came to, we'd had Yaki was our supplier, and they made us an ivory brush and a black brush with synthetic bristles, and it sold extremely well, because quite often the alternative on like these marketplaces was extremely cheap natural fiber brushes, and the people who quite often people had bought them and said, it just scratches your face. They didn't like them. So this was like manna from heaven. You didn't have to hunt for the Yaki website and all the rest of it. And it had the Fox logo on the bottom. So people bought that and they liked it. And then we came to the UK. The problem with Yaki was COVID had happened. Our perceptions of dealing with China were slightly had been altered, so we say, and the MOQs were huge. You had to have hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of brushes before it was worthwhile, and it would take the air freight price was like 150% more than the price of the brush.
Yeah, so I understand. I understand. I
don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But then I hit on the idea, how about a slow train from Shanghai to Moscow? And it literally was a slow train.
What you are saying is that you are spoiling that you are going to have your own brushes too, which won't be Yaki, will be something else. And I think we all appreciate that. I mean, I appreciate also Yaki brushes.
Yeah.
I have a wide selection of them, but yeah.
No, they're good brushes. That wasn't the
exactly.
issue. It's just
Yeah.
we're too small an enterprise
So
to.
basically, now you have soaps and you have shave oil,
Correct.
and then you will have also brushes and aftershave splash. What about
Yeah.
cologne?
We have a familial argument between myself and my wife over colognes and perfumes. Our vendor already has all of our fragrances as perfumes, perfume strength. And it would be the easiest thing in the world just to buy the perfume and then stick a sticker on it. However, she's strongly of the opinion that it's too much of, it's not the right thing to be pushing dupe fragrances. That it's not necessarily part and parcel of wet shaving, so to speak. I'm on the fence over it because I think it'd be quite nice to be able to pair them.
I mean, your wife is right. It's not necessarily part of the shaving. There are some people that like to have the the smell of the aftershave for like 20 minutes to 1 hour and then use their own perfume. Fine. But there are a lot of enthusiasts that want to have these the whole day on their face. So it's a win-win.
It's quite difficult because we did buy one and it smells very nice, but it doesn't have the staying power of the real thing that it's actually based upon. That's the kind of the other point. So there's like a quality issue where you're in control of the product in terms of the soap or the pre-shave or even the aftershave splash, because it has other things other than fragrance, etc., and alcohol. But then when you're left with just alcohol and fragrance, it's not your decision as to how much fragrance is in it in relation to how much alcohol. It's somebody else's. You're just okay, fine. Well, so it's difficult. I don't really have an answer for it for people in that. And the other aspect of it that's quite hard is this: how do you transport it? It's back to the same problem. We still have to find retailers who want to import it.
We
do it in the UK, but our dream is not to remain tied to the United Kingdom because there are so many parts of Europe in particular that have equally, or if not superior, claims to be homes of wet shaving. So we
there are
want
wet shaver all around the world. So it's
correct.
Facebook groups and
everywhere.
So
So
it's actually our moment. I mean, as male specimen, is our moment of taking care of ourselves.
Yes, without a doubt.
Yeah, I mean, this is what everybody does. Then there are other stuff. There are people that use creams on their body, stuff like that, of course. But this is not for everybody. This is
for you have to make. You're right. You have to make a decision. Do you want to shave or do you want to have a beard?
Yeah, exactly.
You don't have a choice. It's either one or the other, and nature basically compels you to do something about it. Either just have this shaggy beard, and you might be compelled to trim it and add things to it, and it's the same with shaving. Because I honestly believe that our generation and probably the previous generation was sold a complete lie by the manufacturers of all these products, mass market ones in particular. They turned what was previously a rite of passage where your dad would show you how to use a razor and how to shave, and then said, use this. And shaving became this chore at best and generally uncomfortable at worst, or something you had to do. You didn't want to do, you had to do.
Yeah. I mean, wet shaving is what transforms a shave from a daily chore
Correct.
a pleasure. So yeah,
Yeah,
I totally
yeah,
understand. This is why I'm here.
100%,
Yeah,
100%. That's why we're all here. Definitely, that's why we're all here doing it. It's definitely something to be cherished. And I know I've got a 4-year-old, so I'll be showing him his dad's razors and hopefully his sisters doesn't steal them to shave her legs with and that type of thing.
yeah,
But,
yeah,
he'll definitely get shown how to use it.
yeah. Okay, Graham, I think that you gave us a lot of great information about your company
Oh, you're very welcome.
and your way ahead, actually, which is very interesting. So I got my beard done. I am very, very, very sleek right now. So I'm happy about that.
Fantastic. I'm
And
very, very happy. I have to say to all your viewers, the amount of time and effort you put into your product and your presentations is immense.
thank
I
you.
don't know anybody in the wet shaving community that does as much in kind of production and pre-production and all the rest of it. It's fantastic. Even like how you position and collate the razors, the brushes, and all the products together to create this theme is fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you.
Really, take my hat
Thank
off
you.
to you.
I
Brilliant,
appreciate
really
that.
is. Yeah, no, it's excellent stuff. I would recommend it. I remember years ago, Douglas Smythe did a video, and it was addressed to YouTube reviewers, and he was basically chiding them for not having come up with a reason for him to send them products. In your case, you just like throw products at you because you know that you're going to show them off and you're going to get an honest opinion and it's going to look really stylish and really good. So bravo.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So yeah, I hope to see you again on the screens, and
Most definitely.
well, we'll keep in touch for sure. So
Sure.
all
Most
right,
definitely. It's been a
have a great
pleasure.
evening, and pass my regards to your wife.
Thank you very
And
much. I'll tell her.
we'll talk soon on Instagram. All right.
Smashing. Look forward to it.
Bye.
Good night. Bye-bye.